Hey guys, Tarket here, and I wanted to give you guys a update on what I ended up deciding to play next. So if everyone was watching previously, I've been messing around a lot with Barrage and Lightning Arrow. And I was trying to pick between which sensei I wanted to do after the Pathfinder character ripped, and I ended up going with Berserker in the end. I wanted to embrace the Berserker noob trap meme. Now, one thing to note is you'll notice that I've spec'd out of Warbringer, and I'm going to quickly cover why I initially planned around Warbringer, why I spec'd out of it, and why I agree and disagree with it being good in builds in general. So originally my plan was to use Abyssal Cry because I'd used Abyssal Cry while leveling Barrage poison builds in the past, and it was actually very powerful. With Breach and Strong Boxes, it can one-shot the entire screen. It feels incredibly satisfying. However, when you look at any build, you need to look at what am I doing, what am I sacrificing this for? So, Abyssal Cry, if you don't know, it's a war cry. It pulses around your character. It has a default very small AoE, so it has to be linked with increased AoE gem. As you can see, I have no AoE scaling on my tree, so the AoE on it is tiny. So you have to put it on a 2-link to start with. So it does the AoE. Any monster it hits gets slowed. That is very nice. Very good defense. And then when they die, they explode for 8% of their maximum HP as chaos damage. In a build which poisons, that then poisons, you can use it on rares surrounded by mobs to one-shot. Very powerful. Sounds great. So why am I using it? So with Berserker, you get the added benefits of when you use Abyssal Cry or any war cry. You recover 25% of your life and mana, so it becomes like a instant Seething for 1/4 of your HP. Really good. Also instant restores all your mana. Very nice. I found it very helpful while running early labs, because I did pick this up as my normal 2-pointer. I did later spec out of it, but I noticed that for lab running, it was very helpful. So maybe something to consider for lab runners. It gives you increased Warcry duration. This doesn't matter too much. And increased Warcry cooldown recovery speed. Normally it has a default cooldown of 4 seconds. This puts it down to 2 seconds. So you have a 2-second Abyssal Cry. Now the problem with Abyssal Cry is already stated, it has to be linked to increased AoE. If you want it to do good damage, which is the whole point of using it, you also want to link it to less duration, which has a more multiplier, and void manipulation, which is another more multiplier. At which point you get really juicy chaos. But even with the increased AoE, with the build with no AoE scaling, it feels like a tiny circle. The other issue I had was there are so many good options to ramp up damage, especially for poison-based build. There's also very good defensive options. For example, you're in a breach. You're being surrounded by monsters. You press Abyssal Cry. You start firing, stuff dies. You go, wow, that was really cool. Second scenario, you're in a breach. You're surrounded by monsters. You throw down a Vaal lightning trap. The entire screen becomes shocked. You one-shot everything. The next set of mobs spawn. You keep one-shotting everything, and you don't need to relay another Vaal lightning trap. You're in a breach. You drop a Decoy totem or a Wither totem, both of which are incredibly good defensively, much more defensive than Abyssal Cry. They group everything up neatly for you. You one-shot everything. You press Vaal Haste. You one-shot everything. When you have all of these amazing options, the issue I ran into was I'd be in a breach. I'd want to press Abyssal Cry, Vaal Haste, Vaal Lightning Trap, and a totem. By the time you've done all of this, you've died. And you could have also just gone bow skill. Oh, I've killed everything. So, if you want to use this, you can use it, but then you drop the other supports. Basically, you pick your poison. It needs a 4-link. Another thing is, this doesn't make the Abyssal Cry any better offensively. It doesn't increase the damage. It just makes the cooldown more manageable and gives you this nice little heal effect. So it's really just a utility 2-pointer, and if you really want to use Abyssal Cry, you can still use Abyssal Cry anyway. You're not going to use it for every single pack. It still has a 2-second cooldown. You basically only ever use it in breaches and strong boxes, meaning you can get away with it having a 4-second cooldown if you really want to run with Abyssal Cry. So anyway, before I go into all the other options, X, Y, and Z, I'm just going to quickly cover over my character, its current gear, so you have an understanding on the mechanics, so that when I get into talking about the skill tree, why I did, you know why I made those options. So I'm level 74. I haven't done a full gear yet. This is basically, I bought the items I had already, and I've just been leveling. I'm just doing Dried Lake. I'm going to do a full character regear in a bit. This is a character impressions video. So I'm using a Lioneye's Glare. Lioneye's Glare is a very undervalued item, and this is actually going to also be my end game bow. So the reason why I went with the Lioneye's Glare is I'm non-crit. As you'll notice from the fact, I'm not using the Crit Strikes gem, and on my passive tree, I don't take any of the crit notes. So that's why I want to go for my gear first. So I decided to go non-crit. Now, the thing which is good about Lioneye's Glare is it has high base fizz damage, very high attack speed, flat mana, hits can't be evaded. This is really nice. If you're a non-crit build, you want Resolute Technique. If you want Resolute Technique, you've got to spend points getting to Resolute Technique. You either come up the top this way, and you spend 8 points and don't get anything really good along the way, or you more realistically come through this way, pick up life, pick up jewels and stuff, life this way, or you come down this way, do Iron Grip, life, maybe even go Blood Magic, this, right? But whatever way you cut it, you're going to be spending, at the very least, 8 points to get Resolute Technique. So it doesn't feel very good doing that. Now, another thing which is good about the Lioneye's Glare, ignoring the fact that it's just a very high DPS bow for a non-crit build, and the fact that it has Resolute Technique, saving like 8 points, it's cheap. It's really, really cheap. I bought this, which is a okay-ish. It's like a fairly well-rolled one. It's not amazing. It's missing about 20-30 top end, but it's like a pretty good rolled one. Already 6-socketed for 5 chaos. You can buy these for like 1 chaos each. Very cheap. I like builds which you can do on a budget, and then you have the potential to scale as much currency into them as you like. I much prefer builds like these than the builds where I'm like, okay, to play this build, you need 50 exalts, or to play this build, you need at least 40 chaos. You can do this build for less than 10c, and it will work, and I like that. The next important thing, the cost brews. Now, when my last character died, right after it died, I managed to snap this off Pee-wee Trade, exactly as is, corrupted, 6-socket 5-link for 25 chaos. I don't know what the dude was thinking. It was a complete and utter steal, and I wanted to fit cost brews well into my build. Now, again, cost brews wells aren't that expensive. In hardcore, they're going for about 60 chaos for a normal one. Obviously not a corrupted 5-link one. They're about 60 chaos. It's not too expensive, but you don't need the cost brews well. The reason why we use it, obviously, is for the poison. Poison cursed enemies on hit. It also gives us 1 additional curse, and your curses can apply to hexproof enemies. This means that there are no things, or no such things as curse immune mobs for me. Very nice. I get additional curse. It means I can do temp chains. It means I can do vulnerability. So this is a really nice DPS chest. It doesn't have flat life, which is an issue, but it does have good evasion rolls, and it has the chaos res, so it's still a very well-rounded thing. Now, because we only poison enemies if they're cursed, we need to make sure we're cursing enemies as quickly as possible. So how am I cursing? I'm using Azzinoth's Gentle Touch. Again, very, very cheap item. You can buy these for like an alc. PogChamp. Curse enemies with temp chains on hit. Flat int, flat life, flat mana. Flat int is very good in this build because all of these builds always struggle with int. They always need to chase int on their jewels and stuff. It's like, int is always an issue for these kind of builds. I get a big chunk of int. I get an okay-ish amount of life. Not very high, obviously, but there's some. A perfect roll one is 30 int, 30 life, 30 mana. A little bit of mana, it helps. It's whatever. Now, if you can't afford the cost brews, you can use Snakebite Gloves. Snakebite Gloves are a pair of unique gloves. They cost about a chaos. They have a bunch of flat life in them. Very nice. I think they go up to 70 or 80 flat life. And they give you increased accuracy per frenzy charge, reduced frenzy charge duration, that's the really bad one, and you poison enemies while at maximum frenzy charges. So if you use the Snakebite Gloves, you want to have as few frenzy charges as possible. Don't do stupid things with minus frenzy charge jewels, that's a waste. Just have 3 or 4 frenzy charges. They don't last very long. Maybe spec into a little bit of frenzy duration. And you basically have a setup where you just naturally get frenzy charges from Blood Rage, and then on bosses you have like a frenzy manual curse on hit setup just to maintain your frenzy charges, and that's how you poison. So again, if you can't afford the cost brews well, you buy like a 1 chaos pair of gloves, 2 chaos, you've got your build sorted. You have a good bow, you have poison. Seems good. If you're doing the cost brews version and you can't afford a really good pair of corrupted like life triple res gloves with cast temp chains on hit, you buy these. A reason why I've been corrupting these, another really nice thing about these gloves, is you can corrupt gloves with curse temp chains on hit, curse vulnerability on hit, curse any weakness on hit. Now obviously as a Fizz Chaos Poison build, we only really care about the temp chains and the vulnerability. In theory, if you're lucky enough or wealthy enough, you can get a pair of Azeroth's Gentle Touch gloves, which both curse Vun and temp chains automatically whenever you hit a mob. Very, very handy. The way I get my second curse is using a Witchfire Brew. In hardcore, these are only about 30 chaos. I paid 31 chaos for this because it had a decent-ish damage over time roll on it. It gives me a vulnerability Blasphemy. The thing which is really nice about it is I get a level 21 vulnerability without needing enough int to run a vulnerability. So I can keep my int requirements low. This also means that for my auras, I can run Arctic Armor and Grace. Again, if you can't afford the Witchfire Brew, you're doing this build on a budget, what I would recommend you do is you turn off your Arctic Armor and you do a Blasphemy Enfeeble. If you don't care about losing the defensive Arctic Armor, you can still do Blasphemy Vulnerability. The reason why I would rather do Blasphemy Enfeeble is you want layers of defense. Having Grace is good defense, having Dodge is good defense. Arctic Armor is really nice defensively. It's very, very underrated. Basically, it gives you chilled ground to FPS stream, best stream. Behind you, very helpful in just boss fights. If you're in a tight room, you run around, boss gets chilled. Breaches, everything's naturally getting chilled. When you're stood still, basically when you're attacking, you take 12% less fizz damage, 12% less fire damage. This helps mitigate the 10% increased damage we take from being a Berserker. When you get hit is generally when you're stood still. If you're being hit on the move, you've kind of gone wrong or been very unlucky. So this just helps mitigate the weaknesses. And yeah, so basically, Blasphemy Enfeeble or Arctic Armor, you get the idea. The only other like mandatory item to complete the 10 Chaos package is the Drill Neck. Drill Neck gives you the 10% increased chance for arrows to pierce, attack speed, evasion, flat life, flat fizz damage, blah, 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 blah. The big one, projectile damage increased by arrow pierce chance. You get 100% chance to pierce. This gives you 100% increased damage. This double dips our poison scaling. It scales our initial hit, and then it scales our back end damage. Ideally, you corrupt one with 1 additional arrow, but I haven't got that, obviously. So yeah, the budget version spelled 1 chaos, 1 chaos. This was like 8 chaos, 10 chaos package, you're done. Everything else, because I'm only level 74, I haven't done my like retrofitting of the character. It's just random stuff I picked up while leveling. Just a random life belt with some resists. Very low life on this. It's only 80 life. You can easily get like 150 life belts. Again, just a pair of whatever boots with some resist and move speed. Again, very low life. A decent brooch ring in the fact that it has some life and some resists on it. It has the flat fizz, which is okay, but everything else is just sort of fluff. Again, just a whatever random amulet. I tried to corrupt a Stone of Lazwa, hit this. It's okay, it's been sat in my stash for ages. It has life on it. That's basically it. And then, again, it has a tiny bit of life, has some resist, has some int. And I'm using a gold rim because this is all my leveling gear. You'll notice that at level 74, with 2 pieces with no life, 1, 2, 3 pieces with very low life. This has low life, but I'm planning on having this kind of gloves for a while. You can, again, just get a rare pair of gloves with the temp chains corruption. So you set on PvE trade, you just track gloves with that corruption. Eventually get up a good rare with high life on it. Or you do it manually yourself, but that's kind of expensive in RNG. And again, this is a low roll drill neck. We have just under 5k life at level 74. Every time you level up, you gain base life. Because we have so much scaling in the tree, every time you level up, you're getting like 60 to 80 flat life. Very, very powerful. You could do this build with good rares in every piece, using a no-life chest and a Devoto's Devotion if you want to, and easily still hit that 6k life threshold. If you went all rares, GG gear, really nice jewels, I can easily see you doing 7k life with this build. If you want to, you can also drop the cost breeze, run snake bites, and use Comb's Heart. And then you're looking at stuff like we're hitting the 10k threshold if we have really nice gear. Very tanky character. Now, one thing to note, and this is why I call this the Poison Tornado character, is because my Cosprey's Will is corrupted, I can't recolor it without spending a bunch of currency at Verucci, so you can see I just put all my utility in there. My Blood Rage, my Vaal Haste, Increased Duration, Faster Proj, Blink Arrow. Just a utility chest with Grace, right? So I've actually gone with Tornado Shot, and this is a Tornado Shot build, and I'm really glad that I went with Tornado Shot in the end. Basically, the way that Tornado Shot works is you shoot, it does a bunch of explosions. Each explosion, so with only one projectile, you shoot one arrow, it hits, splits into 3 arrows. If this is a boss stood right here, I shoot right behind the boss, the arrow hits the boss, pierces through it, does an explosion behind, and then it gets hit again by the arrows bouncing out of it. Now, even though it shoots 3 arrows, out of those 3 arrows, only one of those arrows can damage a mob again. So you hit it with the initial, then you hit it with one of the 3 back end. Even if all 3 of the back end collide again, only one of them will do damage. But you put in something like GMP, so you have 4 additional projectiles, and now suddenly you have a mob in the middle of there, they're getting hit by all of these, you get crazy poison stacking. Now the thing which is so good about this is Tornado Shot is the only like true projectile bow skill, so ignoring Blaster and stuff, like the actual projectile bow skill, where you can use the exact same AoE setup as your single target setup, meaning I don't need to worry about this chest, meaning I could eventually go to a Comb's Heart and just have the 5-link here. I don't need to worry about having a 4-link barrage anywhere. It's just really nice. So Tornado Shot, added Chaos, Pierce, GMP, Slower Proj is what I'm using at the moment. You can eventually drop the GMP if you have a Reach for the Council, but this build really doesn't need it. I actually prefer this build not using Reach of the Council because the Lioneye's Glare saves you all those points. Another good thing about Lioneye's Glare is if you are using the Cospreys, you have an uncorrupted version or just any chest piece for that matter. You run your bow setup in your chest piece, and you spam corrupt Lioneye's Glares until you get one with additional arrow, right? So you get a Lioneye's Glare with additional arrow, Drill Neck, additional arrow, and there's a Tornado Shot enchant, which is 2 additional Proj. I haven't played Tornado Shot before. I believe that is 2 additional Proj in the same way that like GMP works. I don't think it's on the explosion. Very easy to test. In which case you're at 4 additional arrows, meaning you can drop the GMP if you want to, and you get another DPS link. You miss out on the less Proj damage multiplier. That's why people like Reach of the Council, is that less Proj damage. They don't like that. Or if you want to, you can still have that in and just have like crazy shotgunning. But anyway, I'm getting distracted. So this is the base. What does the tree look like for anyone who wants to replicate it? Now, again, I'm only level 70. I've only just started playing the character. I'm sure there'll be some tweaks to be made, but so far, this is one of my favorite builds that I have personally made. The reason why it's one of my favorites is it has very good defense, it has layers defense, and it feels unique. But anyway, so 232% maximum life, 110 points, 1 jewel, 2 jewel, 3 jewel, and phase acrobatics, and all the frenzy charges. That's a lot of damage, because we get 40% more damage here, all the more damage from all of the frenzy charges, which does juicy scaling on our poison, all of this beautiful Proj, which does all the beautiful scaling. One thing you'll notice is I make a point of chasing all of the nodes which have Proj speed in them. Now, Sniper's a good 2-pointer because it gives you projectile damage. Projectile damage double dips. This is the best DPS node on the tree. Proj damage. But the projectile speed also makes running slower Proj much less painful. Sorry for that, but I am running PB trade trackers in the background. Projectile speed from Ballistic Mastery. Projectile speed from this point here. If you're running slower projectiles, it becomes very, very noticeable that your projectiles move slowly. Without these nodes in the tree, it feels really clunky. Just pick them up. It's also why I prefer going to Ranger start than Shadow start, is I get Ballistic Mastery anyway, and a Proj node is better than this node, right? This gives the same amount of damage, so it's 10, 10, 10, then 12, then 14. This is 10, 10, 10, 10, 4% attack speed, then a 16. The advantage of this is you get 4% attack speed rather than that 12 flat life. Also, if you have any elemental damage on your gear, you have Hatred on from a party member using Taste of Hate. If you have any elemental damage, it gets scaled by this projectile damage and it all still double dips nicely because it's a projectile node. If you take these nodes, sorry, the cat, this is only fizz damage, only chaos damage. It won't scale any random elemental damage you're getting. This is just better. If you don't want to run phase acrobatics because you're in softcore or you just don't like phase acrobatics, drop these 4 points, pick up a jewel, pick up 4% life. Or if you want to, if you don't have the currency for good jewels, just pick up these nodes down the front here. Again, if you're struggling with int requirements, instead of getting this 3-pointer, get this 3-pointer up the top. You have loads of options with this build. You have loads of scaling potential past level 90. If you want to reroute things, let's say that you wanted to use, let's say you wanted to use the snakebite gloves, drop the cost sprees, you drop the frenzy charges, drop the frenzy charges, drop the frenzy charges. Because you get your leech through Pain Reaver, you no longer need to route through Duelist. You could potentially come through this way, get the jewel, get increased skill effect duration. Skill effect duration is very important in this kind of a build because it increases the duration of our poison, it increases our Vaal haste, all that good stuff. So you could potentially route through this way, then either come down this way or come up this way and skip Duelist entirely. But that's a completely different build. You have the options, and that's one thing I really, really like about this. Now, to quickly cover my links, just so you know like how it all works and everything. Again, chest. I put it in the chest because you want to corrupt the bows ideally. Tornado shot, GMP, assuming you don't have all the additional arrows. Added chaos, pierce, slower projectiles, void manipulation. That's 5 green, 1 blue. In the bow, this is just the random utility stuff. Blink, faster proj, duration, blood rage, Vaal haste, grace. This is just what I'm running. Boots, decoy totem. I really like decoy totem. Decoy totem is very underrated, very, very powerful. I recommend you try it out. Instead of decoy totem, you can also run a wither totem, in which case you do spell totem, wither, faster cast, increased duration. Increased duration double dips because it makes the totem itself last longer and it makes the wither debuff last longer. The problem with it is you need a 3 blue, 1 red gem setup, which is awkward on evasion gear. You also need the int requirements to keep everything up. Basically, if you're farming stuff like Uber Atziri and Shaper, then use Wither. For general map clear, just like normal, like Uber Atzaro. Kind of like, for like difficult bosses which you don't want to face tank, but you don't need the extra damage for, use a Decoy. If you need the extra damage, run a Wither. Vaal Lightning Trap, very, very good skill. You drop it, you shock everything. 40% more damage, makes our poisons better. GMP. You can link GMP onto Vaal Lightning Trap, and it makes the trap shoot out more projectiles, meaning it covers more of the floor. The duration scales the Vaal Lightning Trap, meaning that the shotgun lasts for longer. I just really like this. Another very good thing about putting GMP in here is it gives you a green color. Ideally, most of your gear is evasion based, especially if you're using the phase acro route. You ideally want to be using Atziri's step boots, so you get the extra spell dodge. So it's important that you try and fit in as many green gems here and there as you can. For the Helm, I'm planning on maybe using a Devo's Devotions. That's why I say the Helm for this one. Cast on damage taken, Immortal Call, Vortex, Duration. So that's 3 red, 1 blue. Because Devo's Devotion is a armor evasion hybrid, getting these colors isn't too difficult. You don't need to run Vortex here. You could instead, this could be where you put your Vaal skill set up. You could alternatively run 2 Vaal Hastes or a Vaal Haste and a Vaal Grace, whatever. I like Vortex. Basically, you get run like a level 5 cast on damage taken, Immortal Call setup. You get hit, Immortal Call triggers, you drop a Vortex. Vortex drops a chilled ground at your feet. It's just nice layers of defense. We already have chilled ground from Arctic Armor, but it's just additional. I like it. You don't need it. Gloves. Arctic Armor, Flame Golem. The reason why Flame Golem is good, Flame Golem gives you increased damage. You can run no golems if you don't like them. They are annoying on chain maps. Don't run them on chain maps. You can run Stone Golem, etc., etc. Flame Golem is good because it gives you just global increased damage. That means it scales our poison, it scales our chaos, it double dips. It's good. Because I like having a max level Flame Golem to get the most out of the damage buff, and I don't want to run a second cast and damage taken setup, I link it with either Minion Res or Minion Life, just so I'm not constantly spamming it. I hate having to always keep them active. Again, to make the colors slightly easier, you can put Culling in there. It makes your minions slightly more helpful. You can just like having the Golem. Every now and again, it will cull something. Most of the time, it will do nothing, but it's somewhat helpful. Otherwise, run it with both Minion Res and Life. good thing about it, again, puts another green socket on your gloves. If you're not running Curse on Hit gloves, double Curse on Hit gloves, or the Witchfire Brew, then I would recommend Blasphemy, Enfeeble, Flame Golem, then either Minion Res Life or Culling. Again, it's about fitting in the sockets where you can. Flask for this build, the only like core flask, this is a life build, have a Seething or a Bubbling, some people prefer one or the other. Atziri's Promise. Atziri's Promise is, again, very, very cheap item. Ridiculously cheap item. I got a perfect Atziri's for 4 Chaos, I think. 20%, 25% of Fizz damage is extra Chaos. It's just extra damage. 2% of Chaos damage Leech. So it gives you extra Leech, extra flat damage, and it gives you the benefits of an Amethyst Flask. So it gives you that plus 35 Chaos resistance. Because we run the Cosplay as well, we have Chaos Res there. If you run the Devotos, you have Chaos Res there. Making this actually a very good build for like Chayula breaches, because you just naturally have a lot of just inherent Chaos resistance without needing to swap loads of gear pieces around. It means you can cap out your Chaos Res very, very easily, which is something I like. Your optional flasks, Basalt. I consider Basalts mandatory and hardcore, but you can play around with them. Stibnite, again, Witchfire Brew is really solid for that Vulner setup if you're not doing this. Sin's Rebirth is another option. It's very expensive. It's basically, it's a Stibnite flask, which gives you Unholy Might. Unholy Might is 30% of your Fizz damage as Chaos. We do get a lot of projectile damage, so the extra Chaos is good because it double dips the poison. We do have, like, decent Fizz damage, but our Fizz damage isn't amazing. So you're not getting loads of damage out of it. Also, Atziri's Promise, because of the way the flask reads. So the flask reads gain 25%. It's part of the flask. Any, like, flask effectiveness you have from, like, the tree or whatever, that will scale that 25%. So if you're doing this as, say, a Pathfinder, meaning that you get more than that, right? Whereas, much like a Silver Flask, the Unholy Might from Sin's Rebirth is just when the flask's active, you get a buff. That does not scale, okay? Meaning that it's just a flat 30%. It won't scale with any other modifiers you have to flasks. It's also very expensive. It's like 100-ish Chaos in Hardcore Breach. If you're going to drop that much currency onto a flask, I'd much rather save up by a Taste of Hate. It's much more defensive, still gives you some offense, or save up and buy, you know, a Dying Sun or something stupidly overpowered. Quicksilvers, some people run with them, some people run without them. Silver Flask, Onslaught is helpful. Second Life Flask if you like playing with 2 Life Flasks. Personally, I'm doing Bubbling, Atziri, Basalt, Witchfire, Quicksilver. That's just the setup I like running with. You need Bleed, Freeze. You have to have those somewhere on your flasks. And then ideally you have a Shock or Curse removal. I know everyone likes running their Quicksilvers with Adrenaline to get that extra movement speed. But if you're playing in Hardcore, you want a way to remove Shocks. If you're not running with the Witchfire, if you're not using a unique Stibnite, please have all 4 of those things. At the very least, have 3. The Bandits for this build, HP, 8% attack speed, Frenzy charges. We don't use faster attacks as a link, because we use slower proj, more multipliers. We basically get all the more multipliers. So getting the attack speed in there is good. Frenzy charge, it's a more multiplier, gives us attack speed. We get a bunch of attack speed on the tree, a bunch of attack speed from the Ascendancy options. It's just really good. Basically, it's just a build. I like it. It has a lot of defense. It has layers of defense, high evasion, high dodge, high HP. We have stupid leech. You have options between Cloaked and Savagery or Rite of Rune. Again, only level 70. Haven't done my Uber Lab. I need to test which of the 2 I prefer, but just briefly. When you take a Savage hit, that means a hit which is at least 15% of your maximum life. Because we are a evasion acro build, whenever we do get hit, that's basically a Savage hit. So this will... We don't get hit very often. When we do, this will trigger, is what I'm trying to say. 100% of damage leeches life if you've taken, so we basically get Super Leech. We gain 50% increased damage. That double dips. It scales everything, so very powerful. 25% increased attack speed. Crave the Slaughter gives us that 25% increased attack speed if we've been hit recently. When we do get hit, it'll be a Savage hit, so you can read this as 50% attack speed. So that's like a really nice steroid and super leech, meaning that when we get hit, we just leech straight back up and we do a bunch of extra damage for 4 seconds. Alternatively, you can run Rite of Rune. This is obviously good on bosses because it's not reliant on any on-kill effects. This is just an always active thing whenever you take a hit. So very good for people who farm bosses. So Uberlab farmers, Atziri farmers, Guardian Shaper, Cloaks, and Savagery. For general map clear, I think I prefer Rite of Ruin. The reason why is 6% reduced damage taken. This applies to everything. If you've killed recently. Map clear, you've always killed within the last 4 seconds. This is just 6% reduced damage. This is basically less likely to get one-shot. That volatile, it's not going to one-shot you as often bearers. This is just, you're less likely to get insta-gibbed. This is a case of you get hit low, you heal straight back up. This is a, you're probably not going to get one-shot option. But this is only if you've killed recently. So for bosses without ads, this becomes much, much weaker. Cannot be stunned if you've killed recently. Basically gives you stun immunity while mapping. Again, very powerful. Bosses without ads, really weak. 25% increased attack speed if you haven't killed recently. So you do still get some offense on bosses with no ads and stuff. But, you know, you need to weigh up the two. I'll try playing around with both. I think I'm leaning more towards Cloaked and Savagery just because it's a bit more versatile. It's good for both bosses and mapping. But I need to see how I feel about Rite of Ruin. Also, the more HP you have, the better Cloaked and Savagery becomes. This is a case of, like, if you haven't got very good gear and your health is still kind of low, remember, you do have that increased damage taken from Aspect of Carnage. So you're still, like, susceptible to one-shots because you are a life build. Rite of Ruin becomes a lot better. If you start doing stuff like Snake Bites with a Comb's Heart, reaching, like, upwards of 8k HP, you're much less likely to get randomly one-shot while mapping or whatever. In which case, I'd much rather take Cloaked and Savagery. But, you know, personal preference, and if you want to still do Abyssal Cry stuff, you can still fit in Warbringer if you want to. But yeah, that is a very extensive review of where my character's at thus far. I'll keep you guys updated. I'm Taki. Have a good day. Bye-bye.